The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. First Contact. It was a clear summer evening in the quiet town of Woking when something extraordinary happened. People gathered in the streets, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder as a strange cylindrical object descended. The air was thick with the buzz of speculation and the palpable pulse of panic. Among the onlookers was a man named Ogilvy, an astronomer whose passion for the stars was only eclipsed by his love for teaching. "I've never seen anything like it," he exclaimed, his voice a cocktail of academic fascination and creeping dread. "It appears to be a spacecraft of some sort, but its design is unlike anything crafted by human hands." As the object touched down, a hatch opened, revealing the source of the mystery. Beings from another world. The Martians, as they would come to be known, emerged, their grotesque forms silencing the crowd with terror. Their bodies were a nightmarish tapestry of flesh and metal, with giant heads and strange, shimmering eyes that seemed to pierce through to one's very soul. The Martians wasted no time in showcasing their advanced intelligence and technology. With a swift and ruthless efficiency, they unleashed their deadly heat ray upon the crowd, turning curiosity into a desperate fight for survival. Chaos erupted as people scattered in every direction, a cacophony of screams and cries filling the air. "We have to get out of here," the narrator, a writer and amateur botanist, shouted to his wife, a woman of remarkable resilience and compassion. They had left London in search of a quiet life, one filled with the simple pleasures of gardening and literature, but now found themselves fleeing for their lives. Driven by a primal instinct to survive, they joined the mass exodus toward Leatherhead. As they raced through the countryside, the narrator's mind was a whirlwind of emotion. He grieved for the smoldering ruins of Woking, the once familiar streets now a hellscape of fire and destruction. Yet, amidst the terror, a spark of curiosity remained. What could drive such beings to attack? "What do they want?" the narrator's wife asked, her voice a fragile thread in the fabric of chaos. "Why are they attacking us?" Those questions hung in the air, unanswered as they pressed on. Suddenly, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of a ragtag group of resistance fighters, banding together in the face of the alien onslaught. Among them was a sympathetic Martian, an outcast from its own kind, hinting at a schism within the alien ranks. The narrator's eyes locked onto the Martian, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a glimmer of understanding. It was a fragile thread, but one that could potentially weave a tapestry of hope. As they reached Leatherhead, the couple found themselves swept up in a maelstrom of chaos and confusion. The town was in disarray, with people scrambling to find shelter and safety. Amidst the turmoil, the narrator spotted the resistance fighters, huddled together in a desperate bid to coordinate their efforts. "What do we know about the Martians?" the narrator asked, his voice laced with a mix of fear and determination. One of the fighters, a grizzled veteran, turned to him. "We've gathered some intel," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They seem to be after our resources, water, food, and minerals. But there's something more, something they're not telling us." The narrator's mind raced as he pondered the implications. What could the Martians be hiding? And what role did this sympathetic alien play in their plans? As he looked around at the sea of frightened faces, he knew that finding answers would be crucial to their survival. That night, under a starless sky, the narrator lay awake, his thoughts consumed by the events of the day. His wife slept fitfully beside him, her hand grasping his tightly. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new terrors, but also new opportunities. And as he gazed up at the dark expanse above, he felt a spark of determination ignite within him, a flame that would fuel his quest to understand the Martians and find a way to reclaim their world. The flight to Leatherhead. As I watched, a hussar came galloping down the road, shouting warnings for people to flee their homes. "The Martians are coming," he cried. I quickly retrieved my servant's box and loaded it onto our dog cart, as it was clear we had to leave immediately. We drove away, the black smoke and red fire from the Martian's heat ray before us. My wife sat silently beside me as the sound of machine guns and rifles cracked through the air. We witnessed the destruction caused by the Martians spreading rapidly. Fleeing, we encountered panicked people, including a group of 3, running down a side street toward the river. Suddenly, the upperworks of a Martian fighting machine loomed into view, its metallic body glinting in the sunlight. We pushed on, driven by our desperate desire to escape. Journeying through the countryside, we saw devastation everywhere. Houses were burned or abandoned, and dead bodies lay scattered. The air was thick with smoke and ash, filling our nostrils with the smell of burning. "We have to keep moving," I urged my wife, trying to keep a sense of urgency. "We can't let them catch us." Despite our efforts, fear and uncertainty gripped us. As we neared Leatherhead, we noticed signs of life returning to normal. People walked in the streets, talking and laughing. It felt like an oasis of calm amidst the madness. Finally, we reached Leatherhead without further incident, exhausted but relieved to have escaped. As we rested and tended to our wounds, I wondered what other dangers lay ahead. But for now, we were safe. The Artilleryman's Tale. The artilleryman stumbled into my tranquil garden, his uniform torn and his face smeared with soot. "They're everywhere," he gasped, collapsing onto the grass, vibrant with the hues of spring yet eerily silent. I helped him to his feet, leading him to a bench. "Who? The Martians?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," he replied, his eyes wild with fear. "I saw one. It was like a giant with tentacles. It grabbed a man, just lifted him up, and he couldn't finish his sentence, breaking down into sobs." I sat beside him, offering a silent comfort. After a moment, he composed himself and continued. "I had to run. I hid in the ruins, waited for nightfall, and then I ran here. I don't know how I made it." "You're safe now," I assured him. "But what do we do? They seem invincible." The artilleryman looked at me, a spark of determination in his eyes. "We dig. We go underground. It's the only way to survive." "Underground?" I echoed, puzzled. "Yes," he said, standing up and pacing. "We can't fight them on their terms. We need to hide, build a new world beneath their feet. They won't even know we're there." I considered his words. It was a wild plan, but in these desperate times, perhaps wild plans were all we had. "All right," I said finally. "Let's start planning." And so we spent the night discussing our strategy, sketching diagrams in the dirt with sticks. The artilleryman's vision was grand, a network of tunnels, rooms for living, and even plans for farming underground. "We'll have to be quiet, careful, but we can do it," he said with a conviction that was contagious. The next morning, we set out to gather what we needed. The world above was a ghost of its former self, the streets empty, the silence eerie. We scavenged from abandoned shops and homes, finding shovels, pickaxes, and even a wheelbarrow. Our foraging was fraught with tension. Every shadow seemed to move. Every silence was filled with the threat of discovery. The artilleryman's uniform, heavy with the scent of sweat and earth, was a constant reminder of our grim reality. We moved stealthily, the distant thud of Martian guns punctuating our hurried scavenging. As we worked, the artilleryman's resilience shone like a beacon of hope. Despite everything, he was a reminder that even in the darkest times, the human spirit could find a way to persevere. Our tunnel grew day by day, inch by inch. It was backbreaking work, but we were driven by the necessity of survival. In our subterranean refuge, we were not just hiding, we were living, and in that, there was a kind of victory. The chapter closes with the narrator reflecting on the artilleryman's tale, understanding now the depth of human tenacity. London under siege. The morning sky over London was a menacing blend of swirling gray and ominous green. The city had become a war zone, its streets now echoing with the distant booms of siege guns and the panicked cries of those fleeing. The Martians, with their towering tripods, advanced relentlessly, their tubes emitting black vapor and deadly heat rays that left nothing but devastation. Young Tom, alongside Mrs. Elphinstone and her sister-in-law, pushed through the terrified crowd. "We must keep moving," Tom urged, his voice strained. "But where can we go to escape these monsters?" Mrs. Elphinstone asked, her eyes reflecting her fear. "Just reach the coast, any coast. We'll find a way to leave England," Tom assured her. As they hurried, the ground shook with the Martians' relentless advance. A tattered figure, later identified as Major Eden, emerged from the shadows. "The barracks have fallen," he rasped. Tom acknowledged the grim news. The group, accompanied by a disparate band of survivors, made their way toward the Thames, hoping the Martians' apparent aversion to water would provide some refuge. They encountered soldiers huddled under a railway bridge, their morale shattered. "Are we truly helpless against them?" Tom asked desperately. A weary sergeant replied, "Their machines are indestructible. Our weapons are useless, and their black smoke suffocates us." As they spoke, a towering pillar of green smoke signaled another Martian assault. The group pressed on, the terrifying sounds of heat rays and screams echoing in their ears. They reached the embankment where chaos reigned as people desperately tried to escape by boat and barge. Tom, Mrs. Elphinstone, and the remaining survivors joined the throng, frantically seeking a vessel to carry them to safety. Desperation and desolation. The world had changed overnight. The once bustling streets of London were now silent, save for the occasional distant crash of falling buildings and the eerie hum of the Martian machine. The sky, a canvas of gray and black, was heavy with the remnants of the poison clouds that had claimed so many lives. In a small abandoned house in Upper Halliford, the narrator and the curate huddled together, their faces pale in the dim light. "We must not lose hope," the narrator whispered. "The Martians may have technology, but they do not understand our will to survive." "But the black smoke," the curate moaned. "It's everywhere. How can we fight something we cannot even see?" The narrator peered out of the grimy window, watching as the thick vapor rolled over the hills. "We stay above it," he said. "On rooftops, in the trees. We stay where the air is clear." As they spoke, a loud hissing sound filled the air. They watched as a Martian machine waded through the vapor, clearing it with jets of steam. It was a small victory. They scavenged for food in deserted homes, drank water strained through handkerchiefs to remove the powdery scum, and whispered in the dark. One evening, the curate broke the silence. "Do you think it will ever end?" he asked. The narrator watched him, knowing that the man's sanity was slipping away. Then one fateful morning, they awoke to silence. No hissing of steam, no hum of Martian machines. They ventured outside, the narrator leading the way, his steps cautious but hopeful. The streets were covered in a fine dust, the remnants of the poison clouds. And there, lying in the road, were the Martians, their bodies still and lifeless. They lay motionless, their tall, slender bodies a testament to the strange and unfamiliar technology that had brought them to Earth. The narrator's eyes scanned the horizon, half expecting to see more machines or Martians rising from the dust. But there was nothing, only silence. The curate approached one of the bodies, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. "It's over," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The narrator nodded, still trying to process the sudden and unexpected turn of events. As they stood there, taking in the scene before them, they knew that their world would never be the same again. Alone in the ruins, the protagonist traversed the desolate streets of London, where the red weed overran Wellington Street and remnants of the past fluttered in the wind. At Clapham Junction, the residue of black smoke marked the immense destruction. The Crystal Palace stood in the distance, a stark contrast to the surrounding devastation. The protagonist, reflecting on the artilleryman's words and the fallen Martian machines at Regent's Park, acknowledged the victory over the Martians, who succumbed to Earth's bacteria. Returning to Woking, he found his street silent until a light, and the sight of his wife and cousin signaled a reunion and the start of rebuilding their lives.